There's a certain weight to the sound of nothing. Not silence, exactly, but the kind of empty hum that fills a house when no one else is there to break it. It's the refrigerator's low drone, the faint creak of the floorboards settling under their own tired bones, the way the wind sneaks through the cracks in the window frames like it's trying to whisper secrets I don't want to hear. I'm Rita, 38 years old, and this is my world most days. Me, alone, in a small house on the edge of town that feels less like a home and more like a box I've been folded into. My husband, Roland, is a long-haul truck driver, gone for stretches that feel like lifetimes. Days bleed into weeks, and I'm left with the ghost of his presence. A half-empty coffee mug on the counter, a jacket slung over a chair that still smells faintly of diesel and sweat. But he's not here. He's out there, somewhere on a highway I can't picture, while I'm waking up to cold sheets and a bed that feels too big for just me. I've gotten used to the rhythm of solitude, though I'd be lying if I said it doesn't hurt. Mornings start with the same ritual, shuffling to the kitchen in my worn-out slippers, brewing coffee for one, and sitting at the table with a plate of toast I barely touch. I stare out the window at the patchy backyard, where the grass is always a little too long because neither of us has the energy to care. The peeling wallpaper in the corner of the room curls like it's trying to escape, and I can't help but relate. This house, with its faded charm and constant quiet, has become a cage. I used to love the little quirks, the way the light hits the living room just right at sunset, or how the old oak tree out front sways like it's dancing. But now, those things just remind me of what's missing. Roland and I, we had warmth once. Laughter that bounced off these walls, late-night talks over cheap wine, promises we swore we'd keep. But time and distance have a way of eroding even the strongest foundations. When he's home, it's like we're strangers playing house, tiptoeing around the cracks in our conversations. And when he's gone, I'm just here, waiting for a call that might not come, checking my phone like it's a lifeline, listening to the clock tick louder than my own thoughts. I don't know when I started feeling like a ghost in my own life, drifting through rooms that hold memories I can't touch anymore. There's a void inside me, a hollow ache that grows with every empty evening. I've tried to fill it with small things, reruns on the TV, half-hearted attempts at gardening, even talking to myself just to hear a voice. But it's not enough. I crave connection, a spark, something to remind me I'm still alive. And that's when I found myself reaching for my phone one restless night, the glow of the screen cutting through the darkness of my bedroom like a forbidden promise. My thumb hovered over the name, Quentin, an old friend from years back, someone who'd always had a way of making me laugh, of making me feel like I mattered. We hadn't spoken in ages, not since before Roland and I got married, but his number was still there, buried in my contacts like a relic of a different life. I told myself it was nothing, just a harmless need to talk to someone, anyone, who wasn't tied to this suffocating routine. But deep down, I knew it was more than that. My fingers trembled as I typed out the message. "Hey, Quentin, it's Rita. Been a while. Want to grab a coffee sometime?" I stared at the words, my heart thudding in my chest, guilt gnawing at the edges of my mind like a persistent rat. What was I doing? Roland's face flashed in my thoughts, his tired eyes, the way he'd smile at me even after a long haul. But there was another part of me, a quieter, hungrier part that flickered with excitement at the idea of being seen again, of being heard by someone who wasn't just passing through. I hit send before I could overthink it, and the wait for a reply felt like an eternity. When my phone buzzed with his response, "Hey, Rita, I'd love to, name the place." I felt a rush I hadn't known in years. At first, I thought of a coffee shop, some neutral ground with clinking cups and the murmur of strangers to keep things safe. But as I sat there, wrapped in the silence of my empty house, I realized I didn't want safe. I wanted something hidden, something just for me. So I texted back, suggesting a place far from prying eyes. The Sunset Lodge, a rundown motel on the edge of town. I'd driven past it 100 times, its flickering neon sign spelling out vacancy in a sickly green glow, a beacon for people with secrets to keep. It wasn't a place for coffee, and we both knew it, but Quentin didn't question it. He just said, "See you there, 10 p.m. That night, driving to the motel, my hands gripped the steering wheel so tight, my knuckles turned white. My heart was a drum in my chest, pounding out a rhythm of nerves and anticipation. The streetlights cast long, eerie shadows across the empty road, stretching and shrinking as I passed them, like they were trying to warn me to turn back. But I didn't. I couldn't. The Sunset Lodge loomed ahead, its chipped paint and sagging roof looking even worse up close. I parked in the gravel lot, the crunch under my tires sounding louder than it should have in the still night air. The air smelled of dust and something sour as I stepped out, clutching the key I'd gotten from the front desk earlier that day. I remember the clerk barely looking up from his magazine, his bored expression telling me he'd seen 100 people like me before, people with something to hide. My sneakers scuffed against the uneven pavement as I made my way to the room, the number 12 painted in peeling white on the door. I fumbled with the key, my hands shaky, and when I finally pushed the door open, the stale smell of old carpet and cheap air freshener hit me. But then, there was Quentin, already inside, leaning against the wall with that easy smile I hadn't seen in years. His eyes caught mine, and for a moment, the weight of everything I'd been carrying seemed to lift. We started talking, just catching up at first, sitting on the edge of the creaky bed with a couple of warm beers he'd brought in a paper bag. The conversation flowed like no time had passed at all, his laugh filling the dingy room with a warmth I'd forgotten I could feel. But as the night deepened, our words turned heavier, more personal. I found myself spilling things I hadn't even admitted to myself. How lonely I'd been, how empty the days felt, how I sometimes wondered if Roland and I were just going through the motions. Quentin listened, really listened, his gaze steady and kind, and then he shared his own struggles, his own quiet battles with feeling lost. There was this rawness between us, a shared vulnerability that stripped away the years and the distance. I don't know who moved first, but suddenly we were closer, the space between us shrinking until it was gone. His hand brushed mine, tentative at first, and then our fingers intertwined, and before I could think, before I could stop myself, we were kissing. It was like a dam breaking inside me. All the pent-up longing, the ache for connection, it poured out in that moment. His lips were firm but gentle, tasting faintly of beer and something sweeter, and I let myself drown in it. The guilt was there, clawing at the back of my mind, whispering Roland's name, but I shoved it down, buried it under the rush of desire and the desperate need to feel something other than numb. Quentin's hands were rough, calloused from years of hard work, but they moved with a tenderness that made my breath catch. I could feel the warmth of his breath against my neck, sending shivers down my spine, and for the first time in months, maybe years, I felt alive, truly alive. The motel room, with its flickering fluorescent light and threadbare sheets, became a cocoon, a bubble where the outside world didn't exist. Time slipped away, hours melting into a blur of whispered words and tangled limbs, a temporary escape from the loneliness that had been eating me alive. I let myself forget my vows, just for a little while, telling myself it was just this once, just this night, that I could lock this moment away and no one would ever know. But reality has a cruel way of crashing back in. As the first gray light of dawn crept through the tattered curtains, I started to come back to myself. We were lying there, the afterglow fading, when the weight of what I'd done began to settle over me like a heavy fog. I sat up, pulling the sheet around me, my heart starting to race for all the wrong reasons. I glanced around the room, suddenly hyper-aware of every detail, the empty beer cans on the nightstand, the rumpled bed, the faint scent of Quentin's cologne clinging to my skin. Traces of this night were everywhere, and I hadn't thought about any of it until now. My stomach churned as I got dressed, my fingers clumsy with the buttons of my shirt, my mind racing with the consequences I hadn't considered in the heat of the moment. When I stepped outside to leave, the cool morning air hit me like a slap, sharpening my senses. That's when I saw it, the outdated security camera mounted above the motel entrance, its red light blinking ominously in the dim light. My breath caught in my throat as I realized it must have captured everything. My car pulling into the lot last night, me walking to the room, and now, me stepping out with guilt written all over my face. I hurried to my car, my hands trembling as I shoved the motel receipt deeper into my purse, as if hiding it there could erase what I'd done. The drive home felt like a blur, the early morning streets empty, except for the occasional delivery truck rumbling past. My mind was a storm of panic and regret, replaying every moment of the night, every touch, every whispered word, and wondering how I could have been so reckless. By the time I pulled into the driveway, the sun was just starting to peek over the horizon, casting a pale, judgmental light over our little house. I sat there for a moment, gripping the steering wheel, trying to steady my breathing before I faced the emptiness inside. When I finally walked through the front door, the familiar creak of the hinges sounded louder than ever, like an accusation. I dropped my purse on the counter, my hands still shaky, and that's when I heard Roland's voice from the living room. "Hey, Rita, you're out late." My heart stopped for a split second before I forced myself to turn around. There he was, sitting in his recliner, looking worn out from the road but with a tired smile on his face. But there was something else there too, an edge to his tone that made my skin prickle. I tried to smile back, but it felt like a grimace. "Yeah, I was just visiting a friend," I stammered, my voice cracking under the weight of the lie. I could feel his eyes on me, narrowing slightly, searching mine for something I prayed he wouldn't find. "A friend, huh? This late?" he asked, his words slow and deliberate, like he was testing the waters. I nodded too quickly, mumbling something about losing track of time, and turned away to busy myself with anything, grabbing a glass from the cabinet, filling it with water I didn't want, just to avoid his gaze. But I could still feel it, heavy and probing, lingering on my back as I stood there, pretending everything was fine. Over the next few days, the tension in the house became a living thing, a silent beast that prowled between us. Every conversation felt like walking on a tightrope, every glance from Roland a potential fall. I tried to act normal, to cook dinner like I always did, to ask about his latest haul with the same feigned interest, but I could tell he was watching me closer than before. Then came the first real crack in my carefully constructed facade. We were going over bills at the kitchen table, the usual mundane task of sorting through receipts and statements, when Roland paused, his brow furrowing as he stared at our joint credit card statement. "What's this charge here?" he asked, his voice deceptively casual. "Looks like $40 or so, from a place called Sunset Lodge." My stomach dropped like a stone, a cold sweat breaking out on the back of my neck. I forced a laugh, but it came out brittle and sharp. "Oh, that must be a mistake. Maybe I stopped there for gas or something nearby. You know how those charges get mixed up." I was babbling, and I knew it, but I couldn't stop. His eyes flicked up to meet mine, and there was a hardness there I hadn't seen before. "Gas, huh?" he said, and left it at that, but the air between us thickened with unspoken questions. Then, a couple of days later, another blow. We were eating dinner, the clink of forks against plates the only sound breaking the oppressive quiet, when Roland suddenly spoke up. "Talked to Jim from across the street today. He mentioned his security camera picked up something odd a few nights back. Saw your car pulling out real late, around midnight or so. Didn't know you had anywhere to be at that hour." His tone was calm, almost too calm, but his words were like daggers, each one striking closer to the truth I was desperately trying to bury. I nearly choked on my food, my mind racing for an excuse. "Oh, yeah, I couldn't sleep, so I just went for a drive. Needed to clear my head." I mumbled, the words tasting like ash in my mouth, but I could see it in Roland's eyes. He wasn't buying it. Not anymore. The suspicion had taken root, and every excuse I threw at him was just fertilizer for the doubts growing in his mind. I felt like I was sinking, the ground beneath me turning to quicksand, and there was no way to claw myself out. That night, as I lay in bed staring at the ceiling, the darkness seemed to press down on me, heavier than ever. I knew the truth was closing in, and it was only a matter of time before everything unraveled. The next evening, it happened. I was in the kitchen, washing dishes to keep my hands busy, when Roland came in holding something in his hand. My purse was on the counter, unzipped, and I froze as I realized what he must have been doing. "Rita," he said, his voice low, almost a growl, trembling with something I couldn't quite place, anger, hurt, maybe both. I turned slowly, the dishcloth slipping from my fingers into the sink, water still running as I met his gaze. He was holding a piece of paper, crumpled at the edges, and my heart plummeted as I recognized it. The motel receipt from the Sunset Lodge. I'd shoved it deep into my purse, thinking it was safe, thinking he'd never look there. But he had. "I was looking for some spare change," he said, his words deliberate, each one cutting into me like a knife. "And I found this instead. Care to explain?" The silence that followed was suffocating, thicker than any quiet I'd ever felt in this house. It pressed against my chest, making it hard to breathe, hard to think. My mind raced, scrambling for a lie, an excuse, anything to deflect the accusation in his eyes. But there was nothing. The receipt in his hand, the credit card charge he'd already questioned, the neighbor's footage of my car late at night. It was all stacking up against me, an unassailable wall of evidence I couldn't tear down. I opened my mouth, but no sound came out at first. My throat was tight, my palms sweaty, and I could feel the heat of shame creeping up my neck, burning my cheeks. Roland just stood there, waiting, his eyes locked on mine, searching for something, maybe a denial, maybe the truth. But I could see the pain in them too, the way his jaw clenched, the way his shoulders seemed to sag under the weight of what he already suspected. I broke. It was like a dam inside me gave way, and everything I'd been holding back came rushing out in a flood of tears and words. "I'm sorry, Roland." I sobbed, my voice cracking as I sank into a chair at the kitchen table, my legs too weak to hold me up. "I'm so sorry. I didn't mean for it to happen, I swear. I felt so alone. You're gone all the time, and I'm here day after day, feeling like I don't even exist. I felt invisible, like I didn't matter to anyone, not even to you." The words tumbled out, raw and jagged, tearing at my throat as I spoke them. "I met up with Quentin, an old friend, just to talk at first. I thought it would be harmless, just someone to listen. But it turned into more. I sought comfort with him because I didn't know how to find it here with us. It was a mistake, a terrible, stupid mistake, and I hate myself for it." I buried my face in my hands, the tears streaming through my fingers, hot and relentless. I couldn't look at him, couldn't bear to see the damage I'd caused reflected in his expression. But I heard it, the sharp intake of his breath, the way the air seemed to shift as he absorbed my confession. When I finally dared to glance up, his face had crumpled, like the weight of my words had physically struck him. His eyes, usually so steady, were glassy with unshed tears, and his mouth was a tight, trembling line. His hands clenched at his sides, the motel receipt still crumpled in one fist, as if letting go of it would mean letting go of the last shred of doubt he'd clung to. I wanted to reach out to touch him, to somehow pull back the hurt I'd inflicted, but I stayed frozen in my chair, trapped by the chasm I'd created between us. Roland didn't say a word at first. He just turned away, his shoulders hunched, and walked out of the kitchen. I heard the creak of the living room floorboards, then the soft thud of the couch as he sat down heavily, like the weight of the world had settled on him. That night, he didn't come to bed. I lay there alone, staring at the ceiling, my tears soaking into the pillow as I replayed every moment of our confrontation, every word of my confession, wondering if I'd just shattered something that could never be pieced back together. The days that followed were a slow, painful unraveling. Our house, already a place of silence, became a tomb of unspoken words. Roland started sleeping on the couch, a makeshift barrier between us that felt more impenetrable than any wall. I'd wake up to the sound of him shifting restlessly in the living room, the springs creaking under his weight, and I'd lie there, my chest tight, knowing he was just a few feet away but further from me than he'd ever been on the road. I'd cry myself to sleep most nights, the quiet sobs muffled by my pillow, the darkness of our bedroom swallowing my guilt and regret. During the day, we moved around each other like ghosts, avoiding eye contact, our conversations reduced to clipped necessities. "Where's the remote? Did you pay the electric bill? Pass the salt." The silence between us was thicker than ever, a heavy fog that clung to every corner of the house, suffocating any hope of normalcy. I'd catch glimpses of him sometimes, sitting at the edge of the couch with his head in his hands, and I'd feel a fresh wave of shame wash over me, knowing I'd put that pain there. I tried to rebuild what I'd broken, desperate to show him I was sorry, that I wanted to make things right. One evening, I sat him down at the kitchen table, my hands trembling as I suggested counseling, thinking maybe a neutral voice could help us navigate this mess. I promised to be completely transparent, telling him he could check my phone, know my whereabouts, anything to prove I had nothing left to hide. I laid it all out, my voice cracking with every word, hoping he'd see my sincerity, hoping he'd meet me halfway. But Roland just stared at the table, his fingers tracing invisible patterns on the wood, his face a mask of exhaustion and hurt. When he finally spoke, his voice was low, almost a whisper. "I don't know if I can do this, Rita. I hear you, but I don't know." And then he looked up and I saw it, a flicker of pain crossing his face, sharp and raw, before he turned away again. It was like a knife to my heart, seeing that hurt in his eyes every time he looked at me, knowing I was the cause. He didn't reject my ideas outright, but he didn't embrace them either. He just retreated back into himself, leaving me grasping at empty air. The traces of that night at the Sunset Lodge haunt me still, lingering like a shadow I can't shake. Every time I drive past that rundown motel on the edge of town, my stomach twists, and I grip the steering wheel a little tighter. That flickering neon sign, the chipped paint, the gravel lot, it's all burned into my memory, a constant reminder of the choice I made. I can't help but glance at the security camera above the entrance, its red light still blinking like an accusing eye, and I wonder if that footage is still out there, waiting to resurface and destroy what little I have left. Even at home, I'm not free from it. I'll be washing dishes or folding laundry, and my mind will drift back to that room, to the creak of the bed, to the warmth I felt for a fleeting moment before it turned to cold, suffocating dread, reminding me that no matter how hard I try to escape, the past is always lurking just beneath the surface, ready to pull me back under. Don't forget to subscribe, like, and comment if you enjoyed this story. This will help us create more engaging stories for you.